My son Mark stood in my living room and told me that my 7-year-old granddaughter Lily was dead. He said kidnappers took her from the park and killed her, and the police found a body. His voice was flat, but his eyes darted away when I asked to see the report. I felt the floor tilt under my feet. He pressed a paper into my hand, a charity fund form to donate in Lily's memory. "Sign it, Mum. It's what she would have wanted," he said, but his fingers trembled. I nodded slowly, my heart cracking. I folded the form and put it in my apron pocket. I would not sign it. Not yet. I needed to think. He left, and I sat alone in the quiet house, the clock ticking on the wall. I knew what I had to do. Find out what really happened to Lily. It might cost me my sanity and my son's trust, but I couldn't let this lie. Later, I called the police station to ask about the case, but they said it was closed. Mark had already identified the body. Something felt wrong. Why no funeral? Why the rush for donations? That night, I found Lily's favourite hair ribbon under the sofa cushion, the one she always wore. It was clean, as if just dropped. My breath caught. If she was gone, how did it get here? I hid the ribbon in my Bible. Mark was hiding something, and I would uncover it, no matter what. I visited the local charity office the next morning, the one Mark mentioned. The woman at the desk smiled brightly until I asked about the fund for Lily. Her smile faded. "Oh, that's been set up by her father. Very tragic," she said, avoiding my eyes. I insisted on seeing the records, but she said only family could access them, and Mark had already provided everything. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I needed to trace the money and see where it was going. The growing distance from Mark was the price. He hadn't returned my calls since yesterday. Pressure mounted when I got home to a voicemail from him. "Stop digging, Mum. You'll only make it worse." His voice was sharp, a tone I'd never heard before. I made tea, my hands shaking. Then I remembered Lily's school backpack was still in my closet. She left it here last week. I opened it and found a drawing of her and Mark at the park, dated 2 days ago. The date hit me like a punch. How could she draw this if she was dead? I stuffed the drawing into my purse. Mark wasn't just lying. He was involved deeper than I thought. I needed to talk to someone who could help, but who would believe a grieving grandmother? I went to the bank to check my joint account with Mark, something we opened years ago for emergencies. The teller, a young man named James, pulled up the records. "There's been a large withdrawal, ma'am. $50,000, yesterday, by Mark," he said quietly. My blood ran cold. That was my savings, meant for Lily's education. Now I had to protect what was left and expose this. I realized the price was that my son might be a criminal. Pressure came when Mark called again, demanding I meet him at his apartment. "We need to talk about your will, Mom," he said, his voice too calm. I agreed, but first I visited a lawyer's office downtown. The receptionist was busy, but I waited, clutching my purse. Just then, an older woman in line ahead of me turned and whispered, "I heard about your granddaughter. My neighbor's son did something similar, faked an accident for insurance." Her words jolted me. Was this common? I thanked her and stepped into the lawyer's office, determined. Then something unexpected happened. The lawyer, Mr. Evans, listened and said, "We can subpoena the charity records, but it'll take time." As I left, I saw Mark's car parked outside the building. He was watching me. Back home, I searched Mark's old room for clues. In a dusty box, I found childhood photos and a locked diary. I remembered the key. It was in my jewelry box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Entries from recent months talked about debts, big ones, and a plan he called the charity solution. Now I needed to gather evidence for the police. The price was the shredding of my mother's heart. Pressure intensified when my doorbell rang. It was a social worker sent by Mark to check on my mental state. She asked if I was confused about recent events. I smiled politely and said I was fine, but inside, I seethed. After she left, I called Mr. Evans again, and he advised me to secure my assets immediately. Suddenly, my neighbour, Mrs. Gable, dropped by with soup. "I saw Mark arguing with a man in a suit yesterday," she said. "Looked like a loan shark." I thanked her, my mind racing. Then, a surprise. When I checked my email later, there was a message from an unknown sender, a photo of Lily, smiling, with a timestamp from this morning. She was alive. My breath caught. Who sent this? And why? I drove to the police station, the photo printed and tucked in my coat. I demanded to speak to the detective on Lily's case. Officer Miller listened, his expression skeptical until I showed him the photo. "This changes things," he admitted, but said without more proof it was hearsay. I aimed to force a reinvestigation. The risk was that Mark might flee if he found out. Pressure came when Mark showed up at my house, furious. "You're ruining everything, Mum," he shouted, grabbing my arm. I pulled away, my voice steady. "I know Lily's alive." His face paled, and he left without another word. I called Mr. Evans, and we filed a petition to freeze the charity funds. Just as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old library tomorrow. I have proof." It wasn't Mark. Who was this? Then, another surprise. When I arrived home, an envelope was slipped under my door. Inside, a bank statement showing transfers from the charity to an offshore account in Mark's name. I sat down, my hands shaking. This was bigger than I thought. Now I had to decide. Trust the stranger, or go to the authorities alone. I decided to meet the stranger at the old library, clutching the bank statement in my purse. The note said 10 a.m., and I arrived early, my heart pounding. I needed to know who sent Lily's photo and why. I was risking my safety. If this was a trick, I could be walking into a trap. Tension rose as I saw a familiar car idling down the street, Mark's, but I pushed through the library doors. Inside, the air smelled of old books and dust. I stood by the history shelves, waiting. An elderly man shuffled past, but then Mrs. Gable stepped out from behind a bookshelf. "It's me," she whispered, her eyes nervous. "I sent the photo. Mark's in deep with loan sharks, and Lily's safe with my sister in another town." I gasped softly. She explained Mark staged the kidnapping to pay off debts, using charity funds. My hands trembled as she handed me a slip of paper with an address. Just then, the library lights flickered, and we heard footsteps approaching. Mrs. Gable pressed a key into my hand. "Go now, before he finds us." I slipped out the back exit, but as I reached the street, I saw Mark talking angrily on his phone across the road. He hadn't spotted me yet. I ducked into a nearby cafe, my mind racing. Now I had proof Lily was alive, but Mark was closer than I thought. I drove to the address Mrs. Gable gave me, a small house on the outskirts of town. I wanted to see Lily with my own eyes and ensure she was safe. I had to face the truth that my son had done this horrible thing. My anxiety grew when my phone buzzed. Mark had left a voicemail. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk about your assets." His voice was strained, and I knew he was desperate. I parked down the street and walked to the house, my knees weak. A woman answered the door, Mrs. Gable's sister, Helen. She led me inside, and there was Lily, colouring at the kitchen table. She looked up and smiled. Grandma, she said, and I hugged her tight, tears in my eyes. Helen explained Mark had told Lily it was a game to hide from bad people. The relief was overwhelming, but then Helen added, Mark called an hour ago. He knows she's here and is coming to move her. My stomach dropped. I had to act fast. I called Mr. Evans from my car, but as I spoke, I saw a black sedan pull up behind me. It wasn't Mark. A man in a suit stepped out, and he looked official. Who was he? The man in the suit approached my car, holding up a badge. I'm Detective Harris, he said. We're reinvestigating your granddaughter's case based on your evidence. I aimed to cooperate and protect Lily without alerting Mark. There was a risk that Mark might flee if he found out. The stress heightened when my phone rang. It was Mark again, but I let it go to voicemail. I showed the detective the bank statements and Lily's photo, and he nodded grimly. We'll need to bring Lily in quietly, he said. Just then, Helen rushed out, saying Mark had just called. He was on his way. The detective radioed for backup, but as we prepared to leave, Mrs. Gable arrived, breathless. Mark knows you're here, she panted. He's got a lawyer with him, claiming you're unstable and trying to kidnap Lily. My blood ran cold. This was his counter-move, using the system against me. The detective hesitated, looking between us. Then, a car screeched to a halt nearby. It was Mark, and he wasn't alone. He had a woman with him, a social worker I recognized from before. They marched toward us, and Mark pointed at me. She's confused and dangerous, he declared. The social worker stepped forward, asking me to come with her. I stood my ground, but the detective's expression shifted. He said, We need to sort this out at the station. Now I was the one under suspicion. At the police station, I sat in a small room with Detective Harris and the social worker. I needed to prove my sanity and Mark's guilt before he could take Lily away. I felt humiliated at being treated like a delusional old woman. I felt pressured by Mark, who waited outside, smug and confident. I showed them the bank records and the key Mrs. Gable gave me, but the social worker insisted on evaluating me. Your son says you've been agitated since Lily's passing, she said softly. I took a deep breath and recounted everything, my voice steady. Then Detective Harris's phone buzzed. He excused himself and returned minutes later with a file. We traced the offshore account, he said. Mark made large withdrawals recently. Then came a small surprise. The money was transferred to a private account under a fake name, but the bank flagged it for suspicious activity. Mark had overplayed his hand. Just as relief washed over me, the social worker received a call. Her face paled. Lily's location was leaked online, she said. There's a crowd gathering there, news vans and everything. Mark must have done this to create chaos. I stood up, determined to get to Lily before things escalated. But as I left the room, I saw Mark being questioned in another area. He caught my eye and smirked, as if he still had a card to play. I rushed back to Helen's house with Detective Harris, but the street was crowded with reporters and neighbors. I intended to shield Lily from the media and bring her home safely. Our family's shame was being exposed to the public. The strain increased when I saw Mark's lawyer on TV, claiming I was exploiting Lily for attention. We pushed through the crowd, and Helen let us in, her face anxious. Lily was crying in the corner, scared by the noise outside. I hugged her, whispering that everything would be okay. Detective Harris arranged for a patrol car to take us to a safe house, but as we prepared to leave, my phone rang. It was Mr. Evans. The charity fund is frozen, he said, but Mark filed a motion against you for grandparent rights, alleging instability. My hands shook. Mark was using the law to fight me, even from jail. We drove away, Lily clinging to me, but then I got a text from an unknown number. Check your email. He has a partner. At the safe house, I opened my laptop and found an email with documents, signed forms showing Mark had an accomplice, his girlfriend, Sarah, who worked at the charity. She had helped him forge the records. I never suspected her. Now, the police were looking for her, but she had vanished. Lily fell asleep on my lap, and I knew the battle wasn't over. Mark had allies I didn't know about, and they were still out there. I woke up in the safe house with Lily still asleep beside me, her small hand clutching my sleeve. The morning light filtered through the blinds, and I knew I had to secure permanent custody of Lily before Mark could manipulate the system further. I intended to use the evidence against Sarah to strengthen my case, but I was haunted by the fear that Mark's network might still reach us. The tension grew when Detective Harris called, saying Mark was released on bail due to overcrowding and was claiming parental rights. My hands trembled as I made breakfast for Lily, trying to act normal for her sake. Just then, my phone buzzed with an email from an unknown sender. It was Sarah, begging to meet, saying she had information on Mark's other schemes. I replied cautiously, setting a public place for later. After getting Lily settled with a social worker, I drove to the meeting spot, a busy coffee shop. Sarah wasn't there. Instead, a young woman handed me a note. "He knows you're here. Check his home office." I rushed back, and with Mrs. Gable's help, I sneaked into Mark's apartment. In his desk, I found a ledger detailing more fake charities and a list of donors he'd scammed. But as I flipped through, I saw my name listed as a beneficiary in a forged will. My breath caught. Mark was planning to inherit everything if something happened to me. I stuffed the ledger into my bag, but then heard a key in the lock. I hid in the closet, praying it wasn't Mark. The door opened, and I heard two voices, Mark and someone else. They were searching for something. I held my breath, realizing I was trapped. I stayed frozen in the closet, listening as Mark and his lawyer ransacked the office. They were looking for the ledger I now had. I needed to escape without being seen and get the evidence to Detective Harris. It hurt to hear my son speak so coldly about tying up loose ends, meaning me. The situation became more intense when Mark's phone rang and he barked, "Find Sarah before she talks." After what felt like hours, they left, and I slipped out, driving straight to the police station. Detective Harris reviewed the ledger and agreed it was enough for new charges, but he warned me that Mark might escalate. Back at the safe house, Lily was quiet, drawing pictures of our family without Mark. My heart ached for her innocence. I called Mr. Evans to update my will, ensuring Lily would be protected no matter what. Just as I hung up, Mrs. Gable visited with news. She'd seen Sarah lurking near my house earlier. I decided to set a trap by leaking false information about where I'd hidden evidence. That evening, I got a call from a blocked number. A distorted voice said, "Drop the case, or you'll lose more than your reputation." I refused, but when I checked on Lily, her favorite doll was missing from the room. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had been inside the safe house. The missing doll sent me into a panic. I demanded the safe house be changed immediately. Detective Harris arranged a move to a new location, but I knew I had to end this before Lily got hurt. I planned to lure Sarah out using the false information I'd planted. The strain on Lily was heavy, as she was now having nightmares. Tension rose when Mark filed an emergency custody hearing, alleging I was unfit due to age and paranoia. I spent the morning with Mr. Evans, preparing documents to counter his claims. We used the ledger and bank records to show Mark's fraud, but the judge was skeptical without Sarah's testimony. After court, I went to the park where I'd said the evidence was hidden, pretending to retrieve something. Sure enough, Sarah appeared from behind a tree, looking terrified. She confessed everything. Mark forced her to help by threatening her family, and she gave me a USB drive with encrypted files. Just as she handed it over, a car sped toward us. Sarah pushed me aside and ran, but the car chased her. I called 911, but when police arrived, Sarah was gone. Back home, I inserted the USB and found videos of Mark discussing the plan with others, including a man I recognized, his old friend from college, who worked at the bank. The videos were dated after Lily's disappearance. My hands shook as I realized Mark had been planning this for months. Then, my doorbell rang. It was a process server with papers from Mark's lawyer suing me for defamation. I accepted them, but as I closed the door, I noticed a familiar scent, Mark's cologne, lingering in the hallway. He had been here. I immediately called Detective Harris about the USB drive and the break-in, but he was tied up with another case. I aimed to use the videos to secure a restraining order and push for Mark's arrest. I felt isolated, unable to trust anyone except Mrs. Gable and Mr. Evans. The stress increased when the news reported on the custody battle, painting me as a confused elder. I gave an anonymous tip to a reporter about the videos, hoping public pressure would help. That afternoon, I met with Mr. Evans to formalize Lily's guardianship, but he warned me that Mark's lawsuit could drag on for years. As I left his office, I saw Mark's car following me. I drove to the police station, but he cut me off in the parking lot. He got out, his face red with anger. "You're destroying our family, Mum," he shouted, grabbing my arm. I pulled away and marched inside, where Detective Harris finally watched the videos. He agreed to issue a warrant, but then his phone rang. Mark had just reported me for elder abuse, claiming I was neglecting Lily. The social worker was dispatched to the safe house. I rushed back, but when I arrived, Lily was crying, and the social worker was questioning her alone. I intervened, showing the restraining order papers, but the social worker said she had to investigate all claims. After she left, I hugged Lily, promising it would be okay. But then I checked my email and found a message from Sarah's account. "He knows about the USB. I'm in hiding. Don't trust anyone." The message ended abruptly, and the account was deleted. I realized Mark had access to my emails. I changed all my passwords and installed security cameras at the new safe house, determined to protect Lily and myself. I intended to testify against Mark in the upcoming hearing and use the videos to prove his guilt. It was heartbreaking to see how scared Lily had become. She barely spoke anymore. The pressure grew when Mark's lawyer subpoenaed my medical records, trying to prove I was incompetent. I spent the day with my doctor, who confirmed I was of sound mind, but the invasion felt violating. That evening, Mrs. Gable came over with dinner, and we reviewed the evidence together. She suggested contacting the bank friend from the videos, so I called him anonymously. He denied everything at first, but when I mentioned the videos, he panicked and hung up. Just then, my security camera alert went off. Someone was outside. I checked the feed and saw a figure lurking near the gate. It was Mark's friend from the bank. I called the police, but he ran before they arrived. Later, Detective Harris informed me they'd found Sarah. She was safe in a shelter and willing to testify. Relief washed over me, but then he added, "Mark has fled. We have a bolo out, but he's gone underground." My heart sank. I put Lily to bed, but as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Daddy called me on Mrs. Gable's phone. He said he's coming to get me." I froze. How did he get that number? I rushed to check Mrs. Gable's phone, but it was missing from her purse. She looked horrified. I must have dropped it. she said. But I knew better. Mark had an inside helper, and it might be someone I trusted. I stared at Mrs. Gable, my heart pounding as I asked about her missing phone. She insisted she must have dropped it at the grocery store, but her eyes avoided mine. I needed to find out if she was the inside helper and secure Lily immediately. It meant the shattering of a decades-long friendship, and I felt the weight of isolation. The tension rose when Detective Harris called, saying Mark's car was spotted near the safe house, and he advised us to move again. I packed a small bag for Lily and me, my hands shaking. Just then, Mrs. Gable broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Mark threatened to reveal my son's past debts if I didn't help him." She admitted she'd left her phone unlocked intentionally, but she never thought he'd call Lily. Relief mixed with anger. She wasn't a willing traitor, but she'd been coerced. I forgave her silently, but knew I couldn't fully trust her now. We drove to a new location, a quiet motel on the outskirts. As I settled Lily in, I checked the security cameras I'd installed remotely at the old safe house. The feed showed a figure lurking outside. It was Mark, holding a folder. He looked directly at the camera and held up a paper. I zoomed in. It was a forged document claiming I had dementia. My blood ran cold. He was escalating his legal attacks. I called Mr. Evans, but as I dialed, Lily tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, I'm scared," she said, her voice small. I hugged her tight, promising to keep her safe. Then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever. I have friends in high places." It wasn't Mark's number. Who else was involved? At the motel, I focused on gathering all evidence for the custody hearing in 2 days. I planned to present a solid case against Mark, using Mrs. Gable's confession and the videos. It was emotionally draining. Lily had nightmares, and I slept little, jumping at every sound. The stress grew when I received a formal notice from the court. Mark's lawyer had submitted the forged dementia document, and a judge ordered a psychological evaluation for me. I spent the morning at a clinic, where a doctor confirmed I was lucid, but the process felt invasive. Later, I met with Detective Harris to hand over Mrs. Gable's recorded confession. He updated me that Sarah's testimony was strong, but Mark had vanished, and his bank friend was also missing. As I left the station, I saw a familiar face, Mark's college friend, the one from the videos, watching me from across the street. I hurried back to the motel, but when I arrived, the room door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly, my heart in my throat. Inside, nothing was disturbed except for a single item on the bed, Lily's missing doll, with a note pinned to it. "Drop the case, or next time, it won't be a doll." I scooped up Lily and called the police, but as I waited, I noticed something odd. The doll's dress was stained with mud from my garden at home. How did Mark get into my house? I checked my home security app and saw the cameras had been disabled hours ago. Someone had bypassed my system, and I realized Mark wasn't working alone anymore. I moved us to another safe house, a friend's vacant apartment, and intensified security. I was focused on surviving the custody hearing and exposing Mark's network. The strain was wearing on Lily. She stopped drawing and clung to me constantly. The stress reached its peak when Mark's lawyer filed a motion to delay the hearing, claiming new evidence of my instability. I spent the day with Mr. Evans, preparing counter-arguments and submitting the doctor's report. Just as we finished, I got a call from Mrs. Gable. She said she'd remembered something. Mark had mentioned a woman named Clara who worked at the courthouse and could make documents disappear. I looked up Clara online and found she was a clerk in the probate office. I reported this to Detective Harris, but he said without proof, it was hearsay. That evening, I decided to visit Clara's office early the next morning, hoping to catch her off guard. But as I parked nearby, I saw Mark's car pulling away from the curb. My hands trembled. He was one step ahead. I entered the building and asked for Clara, but she wasn't in. A co-worker handed me an envelope left for me. Inside was a key to a storage unit and a note. Check Unit 42B. You'll understand. I drove to the storage facility, my mind racing. Unit 42B was filled with boxes of financial records and fake IDs in Mark's name, but also photos of me and Lily taken recently. Then, I found a ledger with payments to Clara and others. As I flipped through, my phone rang. It was Clara, her voice shaking. "He forced me to," she said. "But I kept copies of everything. Meet me at the park in an hour." I agreed. But when I arrived, Clara was nowhere in sight. Instead, a police car pulled up, and an officer stepped out. "We received a tip about a disturbance here," he said. I explained, but he radioed in. Clara had just been reported missing. My stomach dropped. Mark was silencing witnesses. Back at the safe house, I reviewed the storage unit documents with Detective Harris over video call. I planned to use them to prove Mark's conspiracy and secure Lily's safety. I was increasingly afraid that Mark would harm someone else to cover his tracks. The tension rose when the court notified me that the custody hearing was moved up to tomorrow due to emergency circumstances. I spent the night preparing, with Mr. Evans coaching me on what to say. Lily slept fitfully, and I held her hand, whispering promises. In the morning, we went to the courthouse, and I saw Mark for the first time in weeks. He looked gaunt and angry, surrounded by his lawyer and a woman I didn't recognize. The hearing began, and I presented the evidence: the videos, Mrs. Gable's confession, and the storage unit records. Mark's lawyer argued I was manipulative, but then Sarah arrived to testify, her face pale but determined. She detailed how Mark planned the fake kidnapping and implicated others. The judge seemed swayed, but during a break, I noticed the unfamiliar woman whispering to Mark. I asked a bailiff who she was. He said she was a private investigator Mark hired. After the break, the judge announced a recess to review the evidence, and we stepped outside. As I waited, the PI approached me. "Your son isn't the mastermind," she said quietly. "He's being blackmailed by someone higher up, someone from the charity board." I stared at her, stunned. She handed me a business card and walked away. I looked at the card. It was for a man named Robert, the charity director. My mind raced. Was Mark a pawn? I called Detective Harris, but as I dialed, I saw Mark being escorted out by police. They'd arrested him based on new evidence. Relief washed over me, but then I got a text from Robert. "We need to talk. Your son's not the only one at risk." My blood ran cold. The game was bigger than I thought. After Mark's arrest, Lily and I returned home. But the house felt different, tainted by betrayal. I was determined to ensure Mark faced justice and uncover Robert's role, but I worried about Lily's emotional recovery. It meant a permanent rift in our family. Lily asked about her dad, and I had no easy answers. The anxiety didn't stop when Robert called, demanding a meeting to clear things up. I agreed to meet at a public cafe, with Detective Harris monitoring from nearby. I brought the evidence I had, hoping to trap Robert into confessing. At the cafe, Robert was polite but firm, claiming Mark acted alone and the charity was innocent. He offered me a settlement to drop any claims, but I refused. Just then, my phone buzzed. Detective Harris texted that Robert was under investigation for fraud in other cases. I confronted Robert, and he smirked, saying, "You can't prove anything." But as he stood to leave, Clara walked in, accompanied by a lawyer. She pointed at Robert. "He's the one who forced me to forge documents," she declared. Robert's face fell, and Detective Harris moved in to question him. I felt a surge of victory, but back home, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was a burned photo of Lily and me, with a note, "This isn't over." I called the police, and they traced it to a mail drop, but no suspects. That night, I tucked Lily into bed, and she smiled for the first time in weeks. "I love you, Grandma," she said. I kissed her forehead, but as I turned off the light, I saw a shadow move outside the window. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but the line was dead. Someone had cut the phone line. I rushed to check the doors, but then I heard a faint tapping from the basement. My heart pounded. Were we not safe even here? I heard the tapping from the basement and knew I had to check it out, with Lily asleep upstairs and the phone line dead. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer, my heart pounding like a drum. I needed to secure the house and ensure no one was hiding down there, risking my own safety in the process. A wave of sheer terror gripped me as I remembered Mark's threats and the burned photo. I crept down the stairs, the old wood creaking under my feet. The basement was dark and smelled of damp concrete. I shone the light around, and the tapping stopped. Then I saw it, a small loose pipe hitting the wall whenever the furnace kicked on. Relief washed over me, but as I turned to leave, my foot kicked something metal. It was an old cell phone, tucked behind a box. I picked it up. It was charged and had one missed call from a number I didn't recognize. Just then, the phone vibrated with a text. "He's not working alone. Check the charity board minutes online." My hands trembled. Who was helping Mark from jail? I rushed upstairs to my computer, but the internet was down. Someone had cut the line outside. I bundled Lily into the car and drove to a nearby cafe with Wi-Fi. As I pulled up, I saw Mrs. Gable waiting there, her face pale. "I got a message too," she said, showing me her phone. "We're being watched." We logged on and found the charity board minutes from last year, showing Robert approving large administrative fees to a shell company. But then, a new email popped up on my account. "Stop digging, or Lily's school will get a call about her unstable home." I froze. How did they know where we were? I looked out the window and saw a man in a sedan across the street, watching us. He nodded slowly, then drove away. We were not safe anywhere. I drove Lily to a new safe location, my cousin's empty lake house, and contacted Detective Harris about the threats. I planned to use the charity board minutes to expose Robert's fraud and protect Lily from further harm. It was exhausting, moving again, and Lily was growing more withdrawn, clutching her doll tightly. The pressure intensified when Mark's lawyer filed an appeal, claiming evidence was tampered with, and I received a subpoena to testify at a hearing next week. I spent the day with Mr. Evans, reviewing the minutes and planning our legal strategy. He warned me that Robert had powerful friends, and this could get messy. Later, I checked the news and saw a report that Clara had recanted her testimony, saying she was coerced by me. My stomach churned. Robert was silencing witnesses. I called Detective Harris, but he was unavailable. Just then, my cousin called, saying someone had been asking about the lake house in town. I packed our bags, ready to move again, but as I loaded the car, I found a note under the windshield wiper. "Leave the evidence, or Lily's photo goes public with a false story." It was signed with a drawing of a charity logo. I felt a cold rage. They were targeting my granddaughter to shut me up. I decided to fight back by leaking the minutes to a trusted reporter anonymously. That evening, I used a public library computer to send the files, but when I returned to the car, Lily was crying. "A lady took my doll," she sobbed. I looked around. The doll was gone, and in its place was a business card for Robert's law firm. My blood boiled. They were playing psychological games, and I had to end this before Lily broke. I focused on preparing for the appeal hearing, determined to prove Mark's guilt and Robert's involvement beyond doubt. I was drained from the constant moves and threats, and Lily's nightmares were worsening. The stress peaked when I received a call from the school district, an anonymous complaint about Lily's attendance, triggering a home visit from child services. I spent the morning cleaning the lake house and gathering documents to show Lily was cared for. The social worker arrived, polite but thorough, and I presented doctor's notes and school records. She seemed satisfied, but as she left, she mentioned, "Someone reported you for hoarding and neglect." I knew it was Robert's doing. After she left, I met with Detective Harris, who had new information. The cell phone from the basement was traced to a disposable number, but calls led to a private investigator working for Robert. We reviewed the charity minutes together, and he found a pattern. Robert had been embezzling funds for years, using Mark as a fall guy. Just as we connected the dots, my phone rang. It was Mark, calling from jail. "Mum, I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "Robert threatened to hurt Lily if I didn't take the blame. He has people everywhere." My heart ached for my son, but I couldn't trust him fully. I agreed to visit him, but when I arrived at the jail, his lawyer was there, smirking. "Drop the case, or we'll release tapes of you coercing witnesses," he said. I stood my ground, but as I left, I got a text from Mrs. Gable. "Check your email. Urgent." I opened it and found a video from Robert's office showing him discussing the fake kidnapping with Mark. It was time-stamped after Lily's disappearance. This was the proof we needed. But then, another email came. "Delete this, or the lake house burns tonight." I rushed back, but the road was blocked by a fallen tree. Was it an accident or sabotage? I planned to use the video to secure Mark's conviction and expose Robert, but I feared for Lily's safety if I pushed too hard. The emotional toll was heavy. I missed my old life and grieved for the son I thought I knew. Tension mounted when Robert's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter, threatening to sue me for defamation if I released the video. I ignored it and met with Detective Harris and Mr. Evans to plan our next move. We decided to present the video at the appeal hearing. But first, we needed to ensure Lily was in a secure location. Mrs. Gable offered to take her to her sister's for a few days, and I agreed, though it hurt to let Lily go. After they left, I reviewed the video again and noticed something. In the background, a woman's voice mentioned the board meeting next week. I recognized the voice. It was the charity's secretary, Martha, who had always been kind to me. I called her, and after some hesitation, she confessed that Robert had forced her to alter records. She agreed to testify, but she sounded scared. The next day, I went to the hearing, armed with the video and Martha's statement. Mark was there, looking defeated, and when the video played, he broke down, admitting everything. The judge revoked his bail and issued a warrant for Robert. As I left the courtroom, Robert was arrested in the hallway. I felt a wave of relief, but when I returned to the lake house, I found the door forced open. Inside, everything was ransacked, and a note was on the table. "This isn't over. We have Lily." My blood ran cold. Mrs. Gable wasn't answering her phone. I raced to my car, but the tires were slashed. I was stranded, and Lily was gone. I called Detective Harris from a neighbor's phone, my voice shaking as I reported Lily's kidnapping. I resolved to find her and bring down whoever took her, even if it meant facing Robert's remaining allies. The emotional toll was unbearable. I felt responsible for putting Lily in danger. The pressure was immense. Every minute counted, and I had no leads. Detective Harris traced Mrs. Gable's phone to a remote cabin owned by Robert's brother, and he organized a raid. I insisted on going, and he agreed to let me wait nearby. We drove in silence, my mind racing with fear. When we arrived, police surrounded the cabin, and I heard shouts inside. Then, Mrs. Gable emerged, holding Lily's hand, both unharmed. She explained that Robert's brother had threatened her family, forcing her to bring Lily here, but she had secretly alerted police. I hugged Lily tight, tears streaming down my face. Back at the station, Robert confessed to orchestrating the whole scheme, implicating others on the board. Mark pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against Robert. The legal battle was winding down, but the emotional scars remained. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed at home, she asked, "Will Daddy ever come home?" I kissed her forehead, saying, "We'll see." But I knew our family was forever changed. Just as I settled in, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery, a package from Mark, sent before his arrest. Inside was a handwritten apology and a key to a safety deposit box. I opened it the next day and found documents proving Robert's fraud and a letter from Mark begging for forgiveness. But tucked in the back was a photo of Lily and me, with a new note. "Some debts aren't paid yet." It was in Robert's handwriting. He had allies still free, and they weren't done with us. I locked the door, wondering who to trust next. I stared at the note in Robert's handwriting, my hands cold. Some debts aren't paid yet. I had to uncover his remaining allies before they harmed Lily or me. I called Detective Harris, but he was in a meeting, so I left an urgent message. I planned to use the safety deposit box documents to identify anyone else involved, but it stole my peace. I jumped at every noise, and Lily noticed, asking if the bad people were coming back. Pressure mounted when I checked my email and found a message from an unknown sender. "Drop the evidence, or we'll release private family photos." I didn't respond, but I felt watched. Later, I visited Mark in jail, hoping he'd reveal names. He looked thinner, and he whispered, "Robert had a partner on the board, a woman named Evelyn. She handles the money." I wrote it down, my heart aching for my son's remorse. As I left, a guard handed me a folded paper, a note from Mark. "Evelyn knows about Lily's trust fund." I drove home, but on the way, my car sputtered and died. I pulled over, and a tow truck arrived quickly, too quickly. The driver said, "Someone reported you stranded," but I hadn't called anyone. When I got home, I found my desk drawer open, and the safety deposit key was gone. I rushed to check Lily, who was safe with Mrs. Gable, but then my phone rang. It was Evelyn, her voice smooth. "We need to talk about your granddaughter's future," she said. I agreed to meet, but as I hung up, I saw a shadow move outside my window. Someone was in my garden. I decided to meet Evelyn at a public park, with Detective Harris monitoring from a distance. I aimed to record her confession and protect Lily's trust fund. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I was betraying my son by digging deeper, but I had no choice. Tension grew when Evelyn arrived alone, dressed in a sharp business suit. She smiled and said, "Robert was careless, but I'm not. Sign over guardianship of Lily to a neutral party, and we'll leave you alone." I refused, and she slid an envelope across the table. Photos of Lily at school, taken recently. My blood ran cold. Just then, Detective Harris approached, but Evelyn stood calmly. I have nothing to hide, she said, and she handed him a business card, claiming she was there to offer condolences. After she left, Harris told me Evelyn was clean on paper, but he'd dig deeper. Back home, I checked Lily's trust fund documents and noticed odd withdrawals, small amounts over months, traced to a shell company. I called the bank, but they said only a court order could freeze it now. That evening, Mrs. Gable brought over dinner, and we reviewed the photos. She pointed out a man in the background of one, a familiar face from the charity events. It was Robert's lawyer. As we talked, my doorbell rang. It was a process server with papers from Evelyn, suing for grandparent rights based on my instability. I accepted them, but when I turned, Lily was crying in the corner. "I don't want to go away," she sobbed. I hugged her, promising I'd fight this. But later, I found a listening device under my sofa. How long had it been there? I focused on dismantling Evelyn's lawsuit and proving her involvement. I planned to gather more evidence with Detective Harris and Mr. Evans. The strain was affecting Lily. She had nightmares and didn't want to go to school. Pressure increased when the court scheduled a hearing in 3 days, and Evelyn's lawyer deposed me, asking invasive questions about my health. I held my ground, citing my doctor's reports. Afterward, I met with Harris, who had traced the shell company to Evelyn's home address. We had enough for a search warrant, but he needed more time. Just then, I got a call from Martha, the charity secretary. She was hiding, but willing to testify that Evelyn authorized the fake donations. I offered to protect her, and we set a meeting at a secure location. That night, I drove to meet Martha, but when I arrived, the place was dark. I found her trembling in her car. "Evelyn knows I talked to you," she whispered. She handed me a ledger with Evelyn's fingerprints all over it. As we spoke, a car pulled up, and Evelyn stepped out. "Give me the ledger, Martha," she demanded. I stood between them, and Evelyn laughed. "You're too late," she said, pointing to my phone. I had a missed call from Mrs. Gable. Lily was missing from her house. I rushed back, my heart pounding. When I arrived, Mrs. Gable was in tears, and Lily was gone. A note was on the table. The ledger for the girl. I called Detective Harris, and he issued an amber alert for Lily. I intended to trade the ledger for Lily, but set a trap with police backup. The sacrifice was unbearable. I might lose the evidence, but Lily's safety came first. The pressure was immense. Every second felt like an hour. Evelyn called, directing me to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. I went alone, with Harris and his team hidden nearby. Inside, Evelyn stood with Lily, who was crying but unharmed. "The ledger," Evelyn said, holding out her hand. I handed it over, but as she took it, police sirens blared and officers swarmed in. Evelyn dropped the ledger and grabbed Lily, but I lunged forward and pulled Lily away. Evelyn was arrested, and Lily clung to me, sobbing. Back at the station, Evelyn confessed to embezzlement and coercion, implicating others. The lawsuit was dropped, and Lily's trust fund was frozen pending investigation. That night, I brought Lily home, and we sat in the quiet living room. She looked at me and said, "Grandma, I want to see Daddy." I nodded, knowing it was time to face that. I visited Mark the next day, and he wept, apologizing to Lily over video call. He agreed to cooperate fully, hoping for reduced sentencing. As I left, I felt a strange peace. The worst was over. But when I got home, there was a package from Robert, sent from jail. Inside was a simple letter. "I'm sorry. Watch your back." I shredded it, but the words lingered. Was there more? The months passed slowly. Mark was sentenced to prison, but with his cooperation, Robert and Evelyn faced longer terms. Lily started therapy, and we planted a garden together, her smiles returning bit by bit. I focused on rebuilding our lives, letting go of the anger. The toll had been heavy. My son was gone, and my trust was shattered. But Lily was safe. One afternoon, we visited Mark in prison. He looked older, but he thanked me for protecting Lily. "I don't deserve you, Mum," he said, and I nodded, knowing forgiveness would take time. Back home, Mrs. Gable and I had tea, and she apologized again for her role. I told her it was water under the bridge. That evening, I sat on the porch with Lily, watching the sunset. She leaned against me, and I held her close. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. I kissed her head, feeling a quiet strength. The legal battles were over, and the threats had faded. I knew there might always be scars, but we had each other. As the stars came out, I realized that revenge wasn't about winning, it was about finding peace. And for the first time in a long while, I breathed easily, ready for whatever came next.